Hi there. In this video, we're going to cover eventing. If you're building a software system with multiple services and they all need to talk to each other, well, they're going to probably be using a queue. And what are they going to do with that queue? Well, they're going to send messages to that queue. That system is called eventing. You might have heard of an event hub or a service bus, RabbitMQ. Those are all part of eventing, and we're going to discuss what that is and some of the different options for eventing in this video. So stay tuned and let's go. All right, eventing or messaging. What is it and why do you need it? Well, if you're building a system with multiple services which you need to communicate with one another, aka microservices, you're going to need a channel where these services can all talk to each other. For example, every time service A does something, it publishes a message, and anybody who's interested in that message can pick it up and then do something based on that message. That's eventing. But before we talk about it, I want to just briefly touch on this warning here. I really put that in here because microservices make your infrastructure complex. There's no two ways about it. So really consider if you need to be running microservices. And we're gonna have another video about project complexity in the future, but I just wanted to briefly touch on this because you may not need it. So now that you're warned, let's look at a sample scenario of microservices. So here's an example scenario. A request comes in step 0, request comes in into a REST service. The REST service then writes to a database. This is the data storage layer, but this could be a database, file storage, big data, whatever. Could be all three. So the REST service writes to the data storage. And after it's finished writing to the data storage, it sends a message. It's number 2 over here to the message queue. Then the data processing service is listening for that specific message. So it picks it up, does some data processing, and then writes it to a different storage inside the data storage layer. So for example, first the REST service could have written to the database. Now we're writing to file storage as an example. Then after it's done processing and writing to the data storage layer, it sends a message. Hey, I'm done writing to the data storage layer. Then the AI service listens to it and listens to that message and is like, oh, hey, I got this processed data. Let me go run some fancy AI algorithm on it. And then when it's done, it writes it back to the data storage layer. So in a nutshell, this is a very simple example, obviously. It could be multiple processing services, multiple AI services, right? Multiple queues. But at the most basic level, this is what eventing is. You have messages being sent or published and read, received by different services utilizing a message queue. There's really not much else to explain here. Now that you have an idea of what messaging is, let's take a look at some providers. Now, there are a lot of messaging providers. And the main 3 cloud providers, Azure, Google, and AWS, they have their own implementation of queues, topics. In Azure Service Bus, for example, you can create a queue and you can create a topic. They're not the same thing. A queue can, like, you'll publish a message to a queue and it'll be read just once. Whereas if you publish to a topic, it can be read multiple times by multiple services. So a slight difference there, but a very important difference. Google Cloud has PubSub and SQS. These are very powerful, relatively easy to use with good SDKs, services. You also have, so these three up top here. Then you have Kafka. Kafka, you might have heard this. It became super popular several years ago by Apache. It's a very high throughput queuing service that you can self-host. But often, if you're using Kafka you're in the cloud, you're probably going to be hosting it somewhere else and then paying for that. And trust me when I say, sending messages starts out cheap, but if you're not in control, it can get expensive very quickly. So especially Kafka on Azure, in my experience, could end up costing you. RabbitMQ, another option that can be self-hosted. They have a container you can just run and send messages to it, read messages from it. You can actually run this yourself on Railway, for example. And another hosted solution is QStash from a company called Upstash. Also very easy to use. Unfortunately, they do not have a .NET SDK, just JavaScript and other languages, but it's REST-based. So you could just send REST requests if you wanted to send messages. And again, eventing, kind of very straightforward. I just want to warn you once again at the end of the video, make sure you need it, because debugging, troubleshooting this architecture is very difficult. If you send a message and you get an exception somewhere in your logs and you're like, where did this come from? Did it come from this service? Or maybe that service? Or maybe that service? Did the message never arrive? Or did it arrive and get consumed by like a dead instance or something like that? So many things can go wrong. And troubleshooting is difficult. So again, I just want to warn you, make sure you need it. If you do, here are some options. So next, we're going to take a look at payment systems in the next video. So I'll see you there. Take care.